Welcome to the President's Forum podcast. Today we have three distinguished leaders joining us to discuss the future of distance education. Let's welcome Dr. Kate Smith, President of Rio Salado Community College, Dr. Gregory Fowler, President of the University of Maryland Global Campus, and Dr. Mike Flores, Chancellor of Alamo College's District. Thanks everyone so much for being with us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Glad to be here.
Yes.
All right, let's jump right into the first question. I want to start with you, Mike, if I could. How do you see AI and emerging technologies reshaping distance education over the next 3 to 5 years?
Thanks for the invitation, Marty, and glad to be here with everyone. You know, I think it's looking at kind of putting the intersection of several different innovations all together, right? Distance ed and being able to provide access and something that's personalized to the learner with now AI and additional emerging technologies. So I think what it does is it provides for a hyper-personalized experience, right? A higher degree of personalization for the learner and ensuring that there's also more intentional and strategic conversations between the faculty member in partnership with that learner. And so I think that's what's really key. What faculty are able to do utilizing AI is really kind of suss through and get rid of all of the other administrative kind of burdens or things that they deal with as part of the logistics of instruction and really focus intentionally on critical thinking skills related to that specific course. So I think, going back, it is a higher degree of personalization for the learner. It's really the faculty member being able to key in on the individualized instruction with that learner in the course and really having a higher degree of conversations related to that.
This is a broad enough question to start. I want to make sure everyone gets in on this one. Kate, anything you'd like to add on what you think you'll see over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I totally agree with Mike, first of all. I think that the level of personalization that we'll be able to lean into is really exciting with, you can say a lot, you think a lot about artificial intelligence, and especially with generative AI, and we've already moved past generative AI, with as quickly as it's advancing, the ability of really customizing to every learner. I think we're going to see that continue to grow and change. I also think our support services for students, as we lean in, obviously with all the security protocols, et cetera, but as we lean into the opportunities of emerging technologies, we will continue to hopefully find better ways that create greater supports for students 24/7. Right. So we've all seen like the chatbot evolution. And so how there's somebody there to answer student questions. Right. So if you think of that on scale, I think we're going to continue to see a whole lot of evolution in this space.
I had a customer service chatbot work for me effectively for the first time
There
ever in
you
my
go,
life today.
right?
So it must be advancing.
Right, finally.
Yeah, Greg, what do you think? I want to get your take on this.
Yeah, I certainly think those are some of the big areas. We have two big projects going on here. One of them is called Project Sherpa, and it's very much, for those of you who may recall, the story of Pinocchio. We're trying to figure out how do we give everybody a Jiminy Cricket.
Yep.
Whether it is a faculty member or it is a student, how do we make sure that they have that person who knows them, who's able to engage with them in a way that they relate to, and actually moves them forward, whether it's with academic support, whether it's instructor trying to think about how to reach a particular type of student, whether it's a student who may say, I prefer to have this on a podcast or a webinar or a video as opposed to a 50-page text, all of that. And then the other project we're working on is something we call Project Doppler. And that is, how do we take all of the data that we're getting about the student experience and use it to forecast what's going to happen next and engage with them in those types of ways, much like a meteorologist can do with the weather. So one of the things we're seeing with AI is being able to do exactly that, figure out how to take all this data, and whether it's translating transcripts from 4,000 community colleges and four-year colleges so that we can have smoother transfers, or whether it's coming up with new ways to use experiences. All of those are types of things we can do at scale if we can figure out how to have AI help us do those types of things.
Okay.
Sherpa, Doppler, and Jiminy Cricket.
I
love
know,
it.
right, Marty? And I just want to say, Greg, I am not as creative with my project names. Can I adopt Project Sherpa? Because we are having those
Absolutely.
same conversations. I'd actually love to follow up with you because we're having some of those same
Yeah, I always say
conversations.
to people,
Yeah,
the
that's
Sherpa,
great.
they can't climb the mountain for you, but they can be there with you, and they hopefully know the
Yes,
mountain.
I
So it's
love
a
it.
great
It
example for being able to
is.
move it forward.
The question becomes, did you come up with the name or did AI help you generate it? That's I
Oh.
think what inquiring minds want to know. We won't put you on the spot to answer that
And
one.
I appreciate that.
All right, Kate, I want to turn to you. How are you addressing the digital divide and ensuring equitable access to distance education for all of your student populations?
Oh, that's so easy. Just kidding. That is a big, full, complex question, right? So I'll start with a few items and then colleagues, please jump in because my colleagues do amazing things as well. So one is really leaning into increasing mobile friendly, every tool, our learning management system. We've created an app for our learning management system so that students have full access to everything via a phone. We make sure that all of our accessibility features um, work and are compatible with any type of mobile device. We have a student digital experience committee that we formed several years ago now that just works with students and gets feedback and is constantly looking at how do we enhance the student experience across all for all distance students, right? So making sure that all tools across any screen, across any size device, that students, we make it as seamless as possible for students. Same with all of our student support services, so they can access them through any mechanism that they're working on. Um, we also have worked on doing a lot more in the video space, which is not new. I think colleges and universities have been doing this forever, but really paying attention to what is needed when in that student experience to make sure there's a video that can just help them, whether it's the here's what you do on this part of the application, or here's how you use your learning management system to submit your assignment or whatever it is, but just leaning a lot more into that. We also just rolled out we're so excited about it, Marty. We rolled out our first incarcerated education online program. And so that's been years in the making. And I really want to thank the Arizona Department of Corrections and the state as a whole for recognizing that's a huge digital divide. So when somebody releases from prison, if they don't have access to learning how to use a computer, learning how to use technology, they're at a huge disadvantage for re-engaging, in really productive and good ways and contributing, working, etc. Um, those are a few. We also have locations across our valley. So, as you know, the greater Phoenix area is enormous. And so we have 8 different locations north, south, east, west so that learners have a place to go and can access computers, counselors, tutoring, etc., closer to where they live or where they reside. Um, and then we also do a lot of work partnering with other organizations to support our students who are experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, etc. Because if we don't support that and close that gap for those learners, obviously they can't continue. So that's a few. Mike and Greg, you want to jump in? You guys all do. We all work together and always trying to figure out because we have the same goal for our learners, right?
I was going to say, I think, as Kate mentioned, we are in this respect, right, an online learning community, being able to glean promising practices from others for the ultimate benefit of our faculty and our learners. And I think that's really key, especially with something as innovative as AI and utilizing that integration into, what has traditionally been human enterprise, right? So how can we yield the best of our peers, our faculty and staff in being able to support learners? So
Yeah.
hats off to Kate and her team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what Kate said about that access. One of the things that, as we're talking about the joys and benefits of a lot of these technologies, of course, the big challenge is that if you don't deploy these in the right ways, you can actually increase the equity gap
Yep.
as opposed to closing it. And so having various ways to think about distance is one of the things. Sometimes the equipment, as we're looking at virtual realities and the metaverse, We're looking at, some of these things like Oculus glasses that we're deploying for people, but not everybody can afford $700 glasses. So we're
Mhm.
looking at ways to think about, can we deploy these using the regional libraries or centers so that people can have access to them and other things. But it's certainly something that we're going to have to think more about as these things continue to get more complex. So on one hand, it increases opportunity, but on the other hand, if you don't handle it right, it can really decrease the opportunities that people have.
And then Marty, if I can just
It's
add, and I'm so sorry, but I
yeah.
think one other that I think we probably all have, but I think it's important for people to recognize that part of the gap too is if you only provide people access to services during your work hours, that's a problem for your learners who are doing their schoolwork
Right.
between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., which is when the majority of ours get on our learning management system. So 24/7 librarian help, 24/7 technician help, 24/7 tutoring assistance. I think that's also really an integral part of what we do in serving our distance learners
Absolutely.
and will need to continue to do. And to Mike's
Absolutely.
point, hopefully, and Greg's point, hopefully AI helps us do that better. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. It seems like the only real like the change is constant, and it's not just constant, it's accelerating, right? It's always
Yes.
there, but it's also accelerating just in how much AI has changed things in the past 3 or 4 months in the workforce. So I'm curious about how your institution is adapting its programs to meet challenging or to meet the changing workforce needs. Greg, I want to start with you. What's your institution doing to adopt your programs to meet these changing workforce needs? Maybe the answer's got something to do with AI, maybe not. But I think about as a business owner, uh, we want to use tools like this. So when now suddenly we want a workforce that knows how to use those tools, I imagine that presents a real challenge for you.
It does, and I want to go back to what you just said a minute ago, Marty. One of my mentors once said, "This is as slow as things will be for the rest of your life,"
Yeah.
which is sort of a scary thing to have to think about
That
from time to time.
is.
But we're certainly moving at a time when change continues to move very rapidly. I think the biggest thing when it comes to workforce that we are trying to truly make sure we commit to is making sure we're talking to the workforce. Above all, trying to figure out how do we continue to bring in the various types of employers that we are talking to, the various types of organizations, and have a better understanding on both sides of what we do and what we mean by certain things. So we've often talked about, you see probably in all these papers over and over again, this idea of every CEO or every CHRO says they want the same types of skills. But when you start talking about what does critical thinking mean, what does it mean to work with diverse populations, and what does that look like in your workforce? Getting them to define that is one of the things that we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure we are diving into. So it's everything from, are we having the right conversations? What does this look like? Are there various ways, going back to that conversation about AI, that you may actually assess or evaluate these skill sets based upon the reality that you're in? So I know Kate and I do a lot of work with Guild. Mike, you may as well. And when we're dealing with companies like a Target, a JP Morgan Chase, so what critical thinking or effective communication looks like on the retail side may look very different than healthcare or finance. So how are we thinking about what we can actually do to demonstrate to these various employers that the students that we have the skills that you need in the ways that you need them to be? And also, how do we rethink our portfolio of offerings in such a way that it's not simply the traditional courses and programs, but we're thinking about various ways to take these skills that we're stacking in smaller modules into various types of experiences. So I say to my team, we want stackability and trackability. We want to be able to make sure that we have these things that are small enough so that we can plug and play them. And we also want to be able to track again in real time how students are doing in them, so we can make sure that we actually impact their success before they get too far down the road, rather than at the end of the term when we're getting a report about something we can't do anything about at that point. So those are a couple of the ways that we're looking at it, the product that we're putting out there, but also the experiences and interactions that we're having with employers.
Mike, I'd love to get your take on this one.
I think what's really important is, we spent some time talking about in the last decade about flipping the classroom, right? And being able to spend more time intently on discussion and not kind of rehashing what's at that time in the hard copy text. I think it's looking at how do we flip the organization? How do we utilize AI and other tools and emerging technologies to be able to spend more time intently focused on higher order tasks, and then utilize tools to be able to deal with those other kind of the other logistical elements within the organization. I was at a convention a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about actually moving their part of their employee onboarding, in which they discuss benefits and other things, actually to a podcast, and put in all of the materials to be able then to flip it to a podcast that the AI tool utilized, and to reallocate that time to focus one-on-one or in small groups just about discussions related to the individuals that are being onboarded into the organization. So I think that provides a lot of proof points for us to really look at that, at being able to emphasize the human nature of education, and then being able to utilize AI and other emerging technologies to optimize the environment for us as individuals within higher ed, colleagues, and also with prospective learners within the organization or within the classroom, whatever that classroom looks like.
So, Kate, I'm wondering then, what innovations in student support services have you found most effective for online learners?
Absolutely, Marty, but I have to go back, and I just want to add two things on the industry side, because I think one thing we're all going to be grappling with as we move forward is how are we preparing learners for the careers that don't exist yet, but they're going to be entering in 4 years from now. Right. And that's for real. Like, we're really thinking through what education looks like and what it means. Totally agree on the shorter term micro credentials, however you might want to refer to those. So for student support services, um, again, it's really about that, making them more personalized and more accessible 24/7. We have things that we've done both. We have something we rename everything Rio. We're not as, again, creative as Greg is. So we have Rio Connect. It's an Inscribe. It's a platform where students can engage, and we've tried to build some of that connection among students. We have all our tutoring, advising, counseling, career services can be accessed virtually for students. We have really leaned into virtual exam proctoring. We used to have students do exams in person all over the country and internationally, and they'd have to go, we had a whole process, and now we've really built out our virtual proctoring system, which is so much more convenient and so much more helpful to our learners. Again, it's our locations with all of those wraparound services that we provide students. And then we also have developed a lot of our own, both at the student level and then at the program level, predictive analytics, so that we can really be more keyed in on real-time changes in classes and curriculum to better support when we can see something's not working, to better support learners.
I want to give everyone a chance to answer this question, and we'll get everybody out of here on this one. As you look ahead, what do you believe will be the biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities when it comes to distance education? We'll start with Greg here, and then we'll go to Mike, and then we'll go to Kate.
This is one of those questions that I'll go Greek on you. It's like the strength and the weakness are the same thing in my head, and that is the opportunities that they'll open up for various people as we're looking at various ways to do that type of assessment. And at the same time, the challenges that come with the current types of assessment, especially when you're talking distance education. I mean, we have reached a point where it's very difficult to deal with writing papers or even multiple choice assessments. And so what we're really starting to dive into is using AI and these other tools to come up with complex assessment models, whether it is virtual simulations. I saw a tool the other day where you basically had an AI tool doing the same job of giving an oral exam to a student in real time that a faculty member would do, and basically judging and writing down their answers and keeping an eye on them to see if they're actually responding in a timely fashion. So I think that what we've got to continue to take a look at is all the various ways that we can now open up, if we can use AI to tag skill sets and abilities that don't necessarily require you to be in a formal classroom setting. If we can track those things and make them match, and at the same time, we have to think about the challenges that come with all the traditional ways that we've been thinking about assessment in the past. and how many of them never really formally assessed the things we were talking about anyway, but even now have become even more invalid because they don't necessarily even have the validity of being sure that the persons are doing them. So how do you create complex scenarios that are going to do that? It's going to be the big one that I think we're going to have to take advantage of.
I think related to what Greg said is really not only the excitement related to the innovation and the utilization of AI, but how do we ensure that we connect those to the populations that we serve? I think that is, that's really going to be the key in the future is how do we bring along those aspirational but challenged populations to ensure that they see themselves around the table and are able to benefit educationally and economically from the utilization of AI as it emerges.
So I totally want to echo the assessment piece. And it's, I feel for our faculty and our institutions across the country because we're in this time of what needs to be taught, given all the emergence of more emerging artificial intelligence, right? So what does it look like to even practice in your field 5 years from now? So how are we teaching and assessing our learners for that? I also think there's great opportunity alongside challenge that as these technologies keep evolving at such a rapid pace, I think it's the World Economic Forum cited that within 5 years, 50% of all workers will need to be upskilled or reskilled. So if we think about that trend into the future, that goes back to how do we keep pace with delivering that and being able to upskill, reskill. And I think it goes, for me, my personal thought is it goes back to what Greg had talked about earlier with those shorter kind of micro credentials, chunks of learning, as I say very formally, and being able to meet that need. But it's a great opportunity as well as a challenge.
Well, it sounds like the future of distance education isn't just about technology, it's about creating meaningful learning experiences that prepare students for success. Dr. Smith, Dr. Fowler, Dr. Flores, thank you so much to all of you and each of you for joining us today. And for all of you at home, you can learn more about the President's Forum and access additional resources on distance education, presidentsforum.org.